Dude, so even in this economy, I have tickets to go see Motley Crue next weekend, or this coming weekend, actually, in Cleveland, Ohio, with our boy Luke Lloyd.
Luke Lloyd, you mean the stand-in
Yes,
for me?
like your backup. Yeah. So I'm going to go see Motley.
That's a pretty good backup. I'll be honest.
It's pretty stellar backup. I mean, it's not the same without Tom Brady, aka James Goldwater, but
Well, you can still win a Super Bowl with that team. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. I mean, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, but yeah, we're gonna go see Motley Crue, Van Halen cover band the next day, and then the day after that, we're gonna go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. So it's just gonna be like a heaven on earth weekend for me.
Oh, dude, well, that is great news.
Did you know that over $5 trillion exchanges hands on a daily basis? That's an average of over $220 billion an hour. Now, how does this much money move every single day, and why does it move the way it does? Here on Drunkenomics, two bartenders who also happen to be students at the University of Nebraska Graduate School of Business are going to sit down and drink to the global economy and try and translate it into English. So sit back, relax, pour yourself a stiff one, and have a drink with us to the comedy that is the global economy.
And welcome back to yet another presentation of Drunkenomics. This is a drinking podcast with an economics problem. And so proudly, I want to welcome you all back as the more gracious host this week, only on the condition that I made a bet with you last week, James, that the VIX was gonna go under 25 sometime in the month of July, and it did it so fast, and it popped right back up so fast. But no, you're a man of your word. I'm more gracious this week, and I'm really happy about it. I don't know why I am. I just am happy about it, and that makes me, Aaron Wong, doing alongside my favorite less gracious host.
Absolutely.
What was your name again?
It feels weird to say this, but James Goldwater, less gracious host.
I know it should not feel weird for you to say that, but it just
But it does. It's been so long.
The tumultuous
but
markets.
It's like when you find that like that hoodie that you've been looking for, the comfortable one, and you finally find it. You're like, oh yeah, hey, and you put it back on. You're like, oh yeah, this is a good
it's
one.
like, oh, it's just so smooth and comfortable. It's like a blanket. It's like hugging me.
Exactly.
Like, that's
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm experiencing right now. It's beautiful.
So you're putting on a hoodie that doesn't have that itch right there in the back of the neck. That kind of like that.
No, I'm putting on the one with that really sweet Drunkenomics logo on the front.
Yeah.
And that really nice soft, like right on the back of my neck. It's beautiful.
Yeah, nice. And speaking of which, want to give a quick shout out to our social media, which is at Drunkenomical, DRUNKENOMICAL. That was pretty bad.
DRUNKENOMICAL.
Wow, gosh, what is happening? I think you should be more gracious. And this is ridiculous.
No. I should be less gracious. That's where I'm most comfortable.
Well, I think maybe that's why you nailed it. But yeah, that's us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have some witty tweets about the markets, market commentary, memes. I don't know. What else do we post about? Liquor.
We drink it.
we drink a lot of whiskey.
We do. It's delicious.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right now it's just too hot for whiskey. I mean, it's not that it's never too hot for whiskey, but it's
definitely warm.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
Beers are so much more refreshing right now. It's like
for me, it's rum and Coke. You gotta go with rum and Coke.
Nice. That's a solid choice, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's beer for me this week.
Maybe a Cuba Libre with a little bit of lime later. I don't know.
Yeah. But if you want to show off whatever you're drinking with us, you can do so if you find the link to our Discord, which is on our social media. It's free to all.
That's our Twitter, our Metaverse, our Instagram, our Facebook, all of it.
Yeah.
It's free to all and cheap to some.
Well, it depends if you're following our non-financial advice, because, I threw some stuff in there. I just wanted to let everybody know that I was placing a trade, just like a temporary bearish trade, just because I think, I see some weakness in the market. So I told everybody I bought a QQQ put. Let's see what happens. I think because I bought it, the market will call a bottom. Just to spite me.
And here's the thing. I'll optimistically side with your put say,
well, that makes me feel a lot
based
better.
on everything I've seen in the news from last week till now, I haven't seen anything that fills me with any kind of confidence.
Right. That's why you better drink that rum and Coke, because that'll fill you with some confidence. But
absolutely.
Speaking of, what an eventful weekend.
Jesus.
Oh my God. So
it was bad. It was. Like, all right, let's get the one that's quick. I should say it's quick.
It's the non-farm payrolls. Is that what you want to talk about first? Let's just get that out of the way real quick.
Yeah, let's get the good news out of the way so we can go to the other news because there's no point in trying to be optimistic after that.
Well, yeah, but I mean the good news could lead to bad news because essentially, so it's non-farm payrolls, which is a pretty big economic event.
Absolutely, huge indicator.
It happened right after the job openings, the JOLTS report, job openings, labor turnover survey. What's the difference between the JOLTS and non-farm payrolls?
So non-farm payrolls, it's actually, there's job openings, which tells you how many people are leaving jobs versus a job report which essentially showing you the number of new payrolls,
Yeah.
essentially, or the number or the amount of payrolls. So it's as long as you see an increase on one, what that tells me or kind of tells you is that when people are leaving a job to go to a different job. So it's not like they're just leaving. If they're not leaving the economy, they're going to work somewhere else.
Cool.
So if you see like the JOLTS numbers going up, but you see your jobs, your non-farm payrolls increasing
as well
faster, that tells you that, okay, people are leaving to different jobs. One would assume that they're better paying. Right. So it's that good news. It's when you see that same direction between the two of them, you can assume that there's some sort of positive correlation. You assume that a good thing is occurring.
Yeah.
Right? Or that it isn't bad news.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's narrowing, right? Which is good. It's good and it's bad because it's, job openings are going down, but at the same time, it's like we're getting closer to an equilibrium, which, like, you know what I mean? Like a one-to-one.
Markets like equilibrium.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like a one-to-one, one job opening for every available worker or every unemployed person that's involved in the workforce participation. So that's good. Even though it really is a sign of tightening, but jobs report showing that there was an increase of non-farm payrolls. So basically more people getting hired, more people finding a job.
More people getting paid.
More people getting paid.
And not by an insubstantial margin either.
No, yeah. I mean it's 372,000, which is, put it in perspective, I mean, the expectation was 275,000. So,
so beat it by 97,000, 100,000 employees, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's huge.
And the reason why it was expected so low is because there were 2 revisions.
Yeah, the previous 2 months had been revised down by 74,000 jobs.
Yeah.
But to be fair, like even though they were revised down, they still beat the original expectation, right? So it's like, hey, we've actually gone back and we've revised your swim time or your run time because the official clock wasn't the one we were looking at. It's you ran slower than we thought you were going to run, or you ran slower than we originally said you ran, but still faster than you were expected to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So
I mean, I ran track back in the day. I mean, and a lot of high school track meets, guess who's there at the end of the finish line? It's not a laser. It's someone holding a stopwatch, right?
Someone holding a watch and then running out and putting and like handing you something to hold on to and putting you in line so that as you come out, they can associate you with the right person with the right time. Yeah,
exactly. So if they said, oh, wait, the stopwatch wasn't working and I pressed it, half a second too late, that could really affect your time. Especially
not your place, but your time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Especially when you're trying to like get recruited to run at the next level or something like that. Yeah, that could be huge. So in this case, they revised it because they're like, wow, the economy is really tightening. QT, which is really going to kick up in September.
Absolutely.
It seems like it has been. QT started last month. It seems like it hasn't really done anything. But let's put it this way, based on the jobs reports we're seeing, they can afford to kick it up in September. I don't see a reason not to. Well, that's the thing about the jobs report is it's basically showing the economy is strong, the labor market is strong, and labor force participation is going up.
Yeah. So the economy is still strengthening. So despite that, I know that even with that amazing jobs report coming out, we still saw markets open down. There's a really simple explanation for that.
Well, that was today. Friday, Thursday and Friday.
Last week we ended up. Yeah. It was bound to happen.
Yeah. I think Friday might have been flat.
It was pretty flat in the end.
Friday was pure consolidation, it seems like.
Yeah.
But the JOLTS report, not the JOLTS, excuse me, the non-farm payrolls came out on Thursday. So, it came out Friday.
It came out Friday.
Yeah. Oh, that was last week was such a short week.
God, yeah. No, trust me, we'll get to the other stuff from last week anyway in just a second. But we're seeing that markets open down after that. Yeah. What most people would say is economically very good news. Here's the reason that often when you see really strong hiring, you see downward trends in markets, and it's basically because most investors look at companies and they don't view employees as assets; they view them as liabilities, or essentially they have to get paid.
Expenses.
So when they see that, they see them as expenses. So when you see, they're hiring more employees, what most investors look at and they see is they go, oh, profits are going to be down this next period.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the production as well. But a lot of times new hires, I mean, in your first 6 months, aren't
particularly productive.
Yeah. Because there's training.
You don't contribute a whole lot to the overall production and the overall quality. Yeah. So it's this idea that you see, like, you look at a company, you see expenses going up and you go, well, it's not going to be as profitable. So if I bought this based on a previous level of profitability, we're not going to see that. I expect the price to go down. So they sell at what they see then as a high.
Yeah. Or it's only going to go lower. But yeah, I mean, I think the summary really is just why not 100 basis points in July?
I'm absolutely agreed with that. I don't
they're
see
not going to. I mean, based on Waller's comments, I don't think.
They're saying 50 to 75. So at this point, I think we can pretty confidently say it's going to be 75 basis points.
Yeah.
We did also see news. What is it? Brainerd said that they need to that cryptocurrency needs to be regulated before it actually causes damage to the economy.
I agree.
We'll see what people say.
Yeah, I mean, and I just want to table that right there, just because. I mean, it's been a tumultuous week for crypto as well, but there's just so much other stuff to talk about.
Yeah, well, what do you think was going to happen? So let's move on to so let's talk about real economic things.
Well, should we answer some questions first?
Yeah, we should. Let's answer the questions. I think these are kind of good mood questions. Well, maybe not good mood questions, but
I mean, we gotta go quick. So one, Synthesis Bureau once again. What's up, man? How's it been? How you been?
Yeah.
What a question. Any good advice for how you afford a house with a
with a shitty salary? All right. I mean, I like on a serious note,
I don't own a house. So, but yeah, I mean,
well, on a serious note, I can tell you that there's a few factors, and it's kind of you do have to come up with essentially the amount of money that you do earn, because that's kind of critical. So you have to have a number in mind. You have to know how then, based on that, how much you can afford. A lot of other things come into play. So if you've been banking with the same institution for a long time, you've been working at the same place for a long time, and you have full-time work, that tends to look better when you go to apply for credit with the institution in question.
Yeah. And a lot of times, if you have I don't know if there's like a co-signer.
That's another big one is that if you can get someone to kind of guarantee your debt,
or if you
helps.
Or if you have like a company 401k or something like that, or an IRA, you can say, hey, this can be a loan collateral or something like that.
You can sometimes put retirement as collateral against it, which is, these are riskier options in that specific
it's
case.
Not ideal.
Having said that, when you don't have a whole lot of collateral to play with, anything to do with buying real estate is risky. So that's the thing. But if you can,
especially in this market,
is you're probably going to have to really lower your expectations on what you're buying. Yeah, there are going to be there's some serious things where you're going to have to lay aside a not insubstantial percentage of cash to buy. If for no other reason, then you're going to have closing costs and other things that are going to be expensive.
Yeah, I mean it's an unorthodox market. It's not going to be like this forever. At least I hope not, because I want to buy a house one day too. You know,
if I were to make a guess, I would say that, and we're starting to see it based on some indications. We're seeing houses coming off the market because people aren't willing to sell them. We're seeing people backing out of sales because they've looked at prevailing conditions and they've gone, actually, I don't see the ability to, which again, people are looking at this like an investment, not like a house to live in.
Yeah,
so like a long-term consumable or a durable good. They're looking at it in different fashions. They're saying, I don't see if I could sell this in the future for profit. Totally ignore that they're going to be living in it for a long time.
Yeah.
The sunk cost of that.
And the utility, the utility of living in a house too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the building of equity while you're at it and credit while you're at it.
Yeah.
What I would say is this, I would set aside money that you can afford to set aside for the next 2 to 3 years, because my guess is at some point in the next 3 years, we should see, it won't be a collapse like 2008, but we'll see, I have to imagine we'll see real estate, specifically housing prices, come back to a much more reasonable price level.
I hope
Substantially below what we're currently seeing, right? So I think I think you're going to see a lot of pressure on the housing market from multiple perspectives, which is to say there is a lot new housing being built.
Well,
the prices people are asking now cannot be sustained in a higher interest rate market, and so you're going to see.
Well, and that's why home builder sentiment is going down. But I think eventually, with new listings, I think home builder sentiment will go back up at some point. Yeah. Hopefully, commodity prices will cool off.
Exactly, and so I think if buying right now, absolutely, I don't see it. To be fair, realistically, I don't see a way you could in the next 2 or 3 years. If you're able to set aside some cash, you could show up at talk to your bank, talk to a banker at your bank, and then you can show up with some cash. You can show up with say, look, this is what I can do. And if you can prove, and this is one of those things that I really hate about when you're trying to buy a house. If you try to prove well, I've paid $1,200 in rent every month on time for the last 4 years. How is that not indicative of the fact that I can afford a $700 mortgage?
Right,
because
exactly.
It should be. But for whatever reason, they don't want that. And there's multiple reasons behind it that I'll get into. It's usually just
but it's a $300,000 loan a lot of times, right? So it makes sense.
That's the big thing.
From a risk assessment perspective on their end, that's how they look at it. But yeah, it's tough. I empathize with you because I've been wanting to buy a house for forever too. But it's now it's just outpaced my current economic situation.
The ability to earn it's now is not a great time to buy a house.
Yeah, it's also because I spend too much money on Glenlivet 14 that's been aged in that cognac.
I'm glad one of us gets to drink that.
Well, it's talk about why I don't own a house. I mean, I got other problems, but moving on to our next question from Buffalo, dude. Yes, that's a great Scotch. Love it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for drinking along with us. I'll answer your question about the blue collar trade job another time, but I love the question about every 10 years has been pretty much a recession. Yeah. So he basically asked, I think COVID delayed our recession. What do you think? Personally, I don't think it did. I think COVID really gave us a quick recession. It gave us a recession that we've been waiting for a long time. But government involvement brought it back up to new heights. And I think, if we see 2 recessions in 2 years, it's because
did COVID delay a recession? No, I think it
gave us one. Yeah.
I think it brought on like a snap recession, I think is the term Aaron and I were using earlier when we were talking kind of. It's is that we both were, when we were talking in 2018, we were looking at, and 2019, we were looking at prevailing economic conditions, prevailing economic sentiment. And we both kind of came to the conclusion that a lot of stuff doesn't making sense. Is that a lot of things were starting to, if you looked at the Fed policy, if you looked at especially the way markets were reacting to any kind of change, any kind of slowing of the expansionist monetary policy that the Fed was enacting, markets cratered and just couldn't sustain themselves. And so to me, that says that like there were a lot of reasons we thought that there was going to be a recession sometime in 2020. Yeah. I'll be honest, neither one of us guessed
that COVID.
Until December, until January of 2020. Actually, around January of 2020, we went, it's actually going to be that.
Honestly, it was more like November of 2019 because we said, okay, if COVID does make it to the States, that's a global recession. I mean, I was smoking a cigar with you. I remember that.
I think in November, we thought it was going to be Beijing and over involving itself in Hong Kong in a stupid way.
No.
We thought
there was that.
It was in December when we started to see the news. It was December we started to see the news of COVID that we were like.
We had heard about it in November. I think I'm pretty sure. Maybe it was. Maybe when we were smoking that cigar together, like it could have been December.
But here's the thing: is the issues that COVID revealed and caused, many of which have not been solved, have been dealt with through
this government
intervention and government policy. And now as the government removes itself, a lot of that was as a former concrete guy, you'll appreciate this. It paved over all the rot and all the other problems, but it continues to rot. Like those issues remain. And
so now you have gaps in your concrete fillings,
so that's what I think we're going to start to see things settle. And so So the problems that existed pre-COVID are still there. And so those problems are going to keep festering. You're going to continue to have an issue. Right. So I think the problems that were going to cause a recession anyway are still there and are continuing to gonna cause a recession.
Yeah, but if you think about it, but there was a recovery because
it's hard not to be when there's that much free money.
Yeah, a year ago the economy was actually relatively strong if you look at it. I mean, granted, labor participation, all kinds of that was very weak. There were still some gaps, like I said, or like you said,
problems.
But it was relatively strong. People were coming back to work. I mean, the markets were taking off. Everything seemed good. Earnings revisions were up through the roof. I mean, record highs, everything. Record high profits for a bunch of different companies. But little companies were left behind. So that's where we had that wage inflation. And then, now we have this current problem, which I think, if you really want to know, I think personally, 2020 COVID lows, that could be where the market goes. Because I think the markets were going to go to COVID lows. I think it was going to do that slowly. Whether or not the government interfered, whether or not COVID was even a thing.
Yeah, without COVID, I don't think we don't end up at those levels.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, but I think COVID just, it brought us to our 2020 lows like that. And then, we recovered in the manner in which we did, which was government interference, government intervention, however you want to look at it. And I think if we go back down to 2020 COVID lows, maybe not even that low, but if we go back down around that area, I think it wouldn't surprise me. I don't want it to happen. I'm long the markets personally.
So am I.
Yeah, but I got a timeline.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to be able to buy in at a discount. To be fair.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, that's my quick answer to that question. Because speaking of a recession, I think there's so many catalysts. I think it's really starting to pour in. Yeah. Hopefully earnings will keep everything okay, but this is the start of earnings season, right? This Thursday, Friday.
It's a stacked weekend.
Yeah, and earnings always start with financials, right? So 14th, a bunch of banks come out. 15th, a bunch of banks come out. 18th of next week, a bunch of banks come out. So yeah, I'd be shocked if they didn't forecast a much weaker Q3 and a much weaker Q4. And I think a lot of that has to do with what's going on, not in the US.
Yeah, so here's I guess if we're going to look at the earnings before we jump on anything else, the earnings from Thursday, some big ones. These are 2 or 3 I'd look at. Actually, 4 I really want to look at. I'd look at 1, JP Morgan Chase is reporting. ConAgra.
ConAgra is huge. That's a big one on Thursday.
Which goes into what we're about to talk about. Morgan Stanley and Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing, TSM. So those are Thursday, and then Friday.
Wells Fargo, Citi,
United,
US Bank.
What is it?
Bank of
Wells
New
Fargo,
York
US
Mellon.
Bank, PNC, Citigroup, Bank of New York Mellon, State Street, and then I think United Health does too.
United Health does on Monday, but then on Friday,
we'll see how they start to and we'll see. I'd want to look at them to see kind of how they're reacting to new things.
Yeah. But, so like end of this week into early next week, big week for bank earnings.
So expect continued volatility for those reasons, well,
big heads up too. Tech earnings, which is the vast. I mean, that's the bulk of the markets. Tech earnings Monday the 25th that week. So July 25th that week, which also happens to be when the Fed's meeting. It's also GDP. I mean, what a week that week is. That's Microsoft, Google, Apple's later that week. I think it's on Thursday the 28th that week. That's a huge week. I mean, Amazon's that week too. So Facebook
and Amazon will be kind of that.
Well, Amazon I think is a tall tale sign of like the global supply chain, which I think. I mean, we all know what's going on there with the protests in Europe. My God. Can you imagine? How do you forecast for that? Like,
you got a bunch of issues if you're Europe. So the first thing I guess you're looking at if you're Europe is the fact that for the last 100+ days, there's been an armed conflict between 2 absolutely massive agricultural producers. In Russia and Ukraine. And one of those countries also produces a huge amount of your energy via natural gas, and a lot of that natural gas travels on pipelines through the other country. You've got energy and agriculture under extreme pressure.
Yeah, and that pipeline is shut off. Nat gas inventory shortage is because the EIA data came out last Thursday, and that caused nat gas to shoot up. Remember? So
so that's why you're seeing things like, and I think we talked about this last week, but you're seeing like Germany starting to refire its coal plants. Like it's turning them back on. It's getting them running again because they've realized like, no, what
else are they going to do?
We have to. Energy is necessary, so we have to do something. They're taking the long-term approach too. They're expanding their ability to import natural gas from other origins. That's a solution, but that'll take time. And of course, then it doesn't help that you've still got the second and third countries for agricultural exports are both facing farming protests.
Yeah, this is the big. Like I don't know why. I watched CNBC all week last week. Not one word about this. And it's the Dutch farming protest, which is, I mean, this. How do you not talk about this? I don't understand.
Well, I think it's because if you're CNBC, you look at it from the perspective of we're not importing a whole lot of Dutch food into the U.S., so it's not like it's going to affect.
Yeah, so I guess maybe. Let me rephrase. CNBC Europe.
It is on CNBC. It's just on CNBC between about 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Yeah, so it's
when I'm watching and when you're asleep.
Yeah, so my bad. I guess I wasn't watching the correct bureau of CNBC, but yes, the European Bureau of CNBC. I'm sure hopefully they've been reporting the heck out of this, but this is massive news. Like I don't understand how we should be talking about this because if commodity prices go up over there, it goes up everywhere else.
Yeah, it goes up everywhere else because the gap has to be met, has to be filled, and while the U.S. farmer may or may not enjoy that, it's going to occur. No, so what's happened there? If you're not paying attention, or if you have not, if you haven't been, this isn't where you're looking at. Let's
start off in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands, that there's been an increase in demands on curbing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions mainly.
It's mainly nitrogen and ammonia. Those are the two ones. Not that I know anything about nitrogen or ammonia. I mean,
this push is regulating things, especially in agriculture specifically, but in livestock agriculture. And so it's affecting a huge number of smaller ranchers or smaller farmers who handle livestock. So you're seeing these farmers starting to get pushed and squeezed by the fact that they're being disproportionately affected.
Yeah, well, usually whenever these things happen, whenever there's like some sort of regulation that says, okay, we need less of this and more of this, and you guys can't emit this much of this or that, whatever it is, it always hurts the smaller farming businesses. It usually hits them because they don't have the scale or scope that the bigger guys do.
It hits them first, and it hits them harder, right? And so often you see consolidation come after that. So that's what's happening there. So then the German neighbors kind of went. The German agricultural producers, their farming neighbors, jumped on board and joined protests as well. And there's been a push in Germany that essentially towards renewable and towards more renewable energy and certain other credits.
Yeah, a lot of this was done
also affecting their farmers.
Yeah, well, a lot of this was done by the EU. So the EU kind of had this policy, like I don't know how to say it. It's like some sort of weird language, the Natura, whatever, that's some policy in the EU that said there's conservation land, which what they basically want is to reduce nitrogen and ammonia emissions or something like that by 50% by 2030 or something like that. I think that's what it is. Germany might be 2025 though.
Yeah, so Germany has this right now. They're trying to essentially double the amount of renewable energy by 2025, and to do that, it is leading to increased cost to farmers, and so you're starting to see farmers in So the Germans are sitting here very angry.
Well, a lot of these rules too are like, how close are you to these reserves? Like, how close is your land to these reserves that they're trying to protect? And I think this law was put in place in 2019 by the EU. I don't know for sure, but I watched something not too long ago.
The issue in Germany is that what they're seeing is there not enough, in German farmers' minds, not enough support for biogas, which is something that farmers, biogas being something that they consume and also produce. And so in that they're saying essentially you're not giving us enough support, and during a time of extreme economic hardship in the energy sector, it simply does not make sense. When it comes to the Netherlands, and we talk about it's affecting their ranchers and their ability to produce their livestock industry. It's not just like it's going to affect 5 or 6%. Some estimates are suggesting that up to 30% of livestock farmers in the Netherlands would be unable to continue should these things move forward. So when you start to look at one in 3 persons involved with that, that's a problem. Yeah, to put it mildly.
Well, I mean, essentially, these regulations. First of all, they say you can't produce as much, which it makes it tougher for them to break even. If you can't produce as much stuff, like, for instance, if I can only produce 3 beers instead of 6, to make up for that lost revenue, I have to charge more for these 3 beers. And not to mention, the commodities markets, believe it or not, is an auction. Like it's like anything else. It's the entire marketplace, the global marketplace is an auction. So when there's fewer supply, that's always going to drive up prices, no matter what. And if these regulations are saying, hey, you can't produce as much, or it's making it harder for these farmers to produce as much, it's going to drive up prices.
Absolutely.
So because of that, they've been protesting. I mean, essentially, the nature of the protest is, and I'll be dead honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of the way they're protesting. I totally understand where they're coming from, but what they're doing is they're blocking highways. They're blocking. Essentially, what they're doing is they're making it tougher for the global supply chain to actually.
They're doing what kind of all protests do, which is to say that they're out and they're inconveniencing people in order to bring light to the fact that they have a grievance.
Right.
And while you go back and forth, I think that I believe that protest is legitimate.
Yes,
and that
I'm all for the right to protest. I mean, go
right. So that being said, like you run a risk when you protest in these manners of disrupting critical trade and supply chains, and also alienating people against you.
Yeah,
if you're one of those 30% of Dutch farmers who's going to lose their livelihood, you don't got anything. You have nothing to lose, so go for it.
Yeah,
I'd rather be hated, but still have my livelihood than people be absolutely indifferent to me and have lost everything.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anyone who would really go the other way on that.
Yeah, and I think that's where they're coming from. Is this like a lot of these guys are just saying like I can't afford to be operational. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
If I do this, I can't afford to exist. And then the question becomes: okay, well then what are you going to do when you see when you have 30% less animal products?
Yeah,
what's that going to do to us? The number 2 exporter agricultural products. They export $79.5 billion a year. What happens when
it
drops down to?
I thought it was 100 billion or closer to 100 billion. I thought it was like 92 billion or something like that.
So they're 79.
What year was that?
The US is about 120.
Because I thought that
2021. So I guess it's December. Okay, numbers I'm looking at are from December of 2021.
Oh, okay. Because I thought it was closer to 100 billion.
The United States at about 118 billion in agricultural exports a year in a year or in that year. The Netherlands 79, Germany 70.8, France 68. Brazil 55, right? Wow. So that's agricultural exports.
Well, on top of that too, I mean, a lot of it is also fertilizer. They don't like, there's a lot of regulation on fertilizer.
Absolutely.
So you have to reduce, when you can't get as much fertilizer because it's too expensive, you can't grow as much.
Your yield, your crop yield is less.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
while there may be some benefits to that, it also it's less beneficial to the individual farmer, and it's also less beneficial to food prices. And so just to kind of round out what's happening there, we're also seeing, the fishermen, the longshoremen have joined in if they've decided they're not going to, that they're going to kind of block.
Yeah, because I think in the same regulation, they said your boats, like the boats that you guys are using to fish they consume too much.
I guess they produce too much CO2.
Yeah.
So that they need to upgrade their boats, and a lot of them can't afford to. So it's one of those things where it's like, great, this is all well and good in concept and in theory, but you have to give us help for the actual application, or you will see a decrease in CO2 emissions, but it's because you will have fewer people fishing. So it's like you're also going to see a loss of economic output going hand in hand with that.
And this is just so inconvenient because it's in the middle of a food crisis already. In a lot of countries,
the opening stages of a food crisis in many countries globally.
Which ironically, I think a lot of the food crises, whatever it is, the food crises, plural for crisis, right? Crises? Right?
It's one crisis, multiple crises.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, English is my second language, okay? So bear with me here on that one. But it really is, I swear. But in the midst of a global food crisis, a lot of people want to argue it's caused by global warming. So that's kind of the irony of this, right?
Yeah, the very actions that are being taken to prevent or lessen the effects of climate change, so that we don't have a food crisis, so we don't have multiple food crises in the future, are causing one now.
Right.
Because and in the end, my view is it's been poorly considered, poorly thought through, and so
but there was a lot of pressure to get it passed, and I think
now you have to make it work, and that's the critical thing is you have to actually make it work.
Yeah. But I think I think the problem with it was whatever was passed in 2019, I think it was just rushed. Like that's
what legislation isn't. If you wait to and here's my thing, and I'll say this about, and this is true of any political system that I've living witnessed. If you don't pass any laws or any legislation until it's perfect, you're not passing anything.
Yeah, it's never going to get done.
So you just need to pass the best thing you possibly can.
Yeah.
And folks, I admonish specifically the U.S. political system. You do then have to go back and improve it as time goes on. You can't just let it go.
Yeah, so there's that. The fishermen have come along. Sorry to just end that conversation, but I just didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. But I
absolutely understand.
Yeah, but the fishermen joined along, kind of for the same reasons, and then on top of that, I think India and Poland, they're also protesting too, kind of in the same manner. I don't know if they're blocking anything, and I don't think it's as severe as the Dutch. I mean, this is like, I don't think it's a third of the Polish workforce or a third of the Indian workforce that's going in doing that.
So I think that what you're seeing is, if you're seeing Poland is also going to be under this kind of same EU umbrella, these same EU issues. They may be seeing less effects on already built infrastructure and assets. So they might not be quite so hard done by this, but they're certainly going to be upset. India is also, their farmers are protesting, and we've talked about some of the reasons. So there's an export ban on grain.
Yes.
There are multiple things where we're seeing constraints and kind of price controls that are affecting the farmers there. So they're sitting here going, hey.
Yeah, well, when I said India is protesting, I don't mean they're protesting for the same reasons the Dutch are.
But they are protesting they're protesting for different reasons. But it's the same reason in the end, is it affects my bottom line and it hurts my business. The causation of that is different.
Yeah, but essentially, like, what does this do to commodity prices around the world? Luckily for us, in the last couple of weeks, commodity prices have cooled off a little bit, but
give it time. They're about to uncool.
Dude, if I had to forecast the outcome of this, it's not going to be good for commodity prices. I'm not saying go long commodity futures right now. not financial advice.
I just say I don't see this as calming the prices as we move forward.
It's very much tightening supply. It's
And if you want a perfect example of that, we just need to take a hop, skip, and a jump over right next to India.
Right next to India. There's an island
to the nation to the southeast of the subcontinent, and it's the lovely nation of Sri Lanka. For those of you still using your old encyclopedias or your old atlases, the island of Ceylon.
Yeah, and this is actually really sad. I mean, this is even sadder than the Dutch farmer protest. This is
in respect. This is a so it started with where did it start? Sri Lanka's got a lot of problems. One of their more recent ones, specifically in agriculture, is that they also passed some laws. They took action to reduce the amount of fertilizer being used in their agricultural products, which caused a pretty substantial decrease in the amount of rice being produced on the island. And so they began to import, I saw 600,000 tons of rice to meet the caloric needs of the people, right? In other words, for the people to eat, right? So it's not like they've stopped producing an input good into a different product. So like they cut back on sugar to make soda. No, they cut back on rice, which is a base ingredient. It's a staple of the diet of the people.
And they didn't make it for anywhere else. So it was just
so it's import. It's now being imported. And this coming in with several other factors, right? So Sri Lanka is an island, which means that everything has to come in by plane or by boat.
You can't drive it on
and
the
it is
truck,
very inefficient to move heavy things by plane. So it has to come in by boat.
Yeah, i.e. tons of rice. Yeah.
I.e. tons of rice, i.e. fuel. And
which they import a lot of fuel as well.
Yep. So Sri Lanka is an island that has a population of 22 million people and is roughly the size of West Virginia. Same square foot of West Virginia. It's about 80% the size of Maine, the state of Maine in the U.S.
And it's got 22 million people, so it's about the population of Florida.
So it's the population of Florida.
Yeah.
And so now think about that. So you got the population of Florida in about 4/5 the size of the state of Maine. On the plus side, it is in a warm climate, so it doesn't get overly cold in the winter, so you don't have to worry about that specifically like you would in Maine.
Yeah, but it's also on an island, so...
But it's also on an island, right? So when you can't produce enough food and you're having to import food and you have to import fuel... oil and really a lot of your other goods, and you become very dependent on that export of your agricultural good, and then you stop using fertilizer or as much fertilizer. That becomes an economic problem.
Yeah, but also what happens when you go broke? I don't know. First of all, how did they go broke?
Okay, so let's kind of explore. Let's take a shallow dive into Sri Lankan economics. One of the first places you never invest your money is in a country that is politically unstable. I would strongly advise against, and not financial advice, but I should go without saying, is you really shouldn't invest your money in nations that are currently you can't legally in some cases, in current nations that are currently being sanctioned, in nations that are currently at war, and in nations that are...
I would not buy any Russian assets. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and in nations...
I wouldn't, if you want to. I mean,
and you can legally do so, knock yourself out. And you also don't do it in nations that are politically unstable, right? So you don't invest in a country where the government hold on power is tenuous. And Sri Lanka had a civil war that lasted 27 years.
I forgot about that.
It ended in 2009, right? So, but it lasted longer than 2 decades. And so in 2009, civil war ends. The government reasserts control over the whole island, and it begins to improve the lives of people and to defend. Now, I'll be honest, war is expensive, so that there's a lot of debt from that. They got to a point, and this is lovely, where tourism was actually growing. And so you had Sri Lankan agriculture, but you had tourism, which was really helping them pay their debt, helping them expand their economy, helping them. So you had a country that was really on the up and up. Let's be fair, nearly 30 years of bad.
Coming out of the Civil War.
You've got good things coming and everything, and things are improving. Things are getting better. Well, boy, what happened in 2020 that could damage tourism?
I couldn't think of anything.
It did. So suddenly you have a year of no tourism, actually more like 2 years of no tourism. So you have no tourism. So you see all that go away. So that there's no growth, there's no money coming in. And then you see just a nation that is dependent on imports because, and so it's operating at a deficit.
But it's a country that also because of the Civil War, it was, it's not like it had huge reserves.
No. And so that's where we end up in this position where they spend their cash reserves so they've realized there was a problem earlier this year. A new government came in, I want to say in May. or in March, a new prime minister, new prime minister comes in. He understands that he's got a very serious problem ahead of him economically, and he starts the process of trying to deal with it. They begin certain austerity, but to survive, they start to spend all their foreign currency reserves.
Why do they perform austerity? Was it just because they
had $51 billion in debt, and
they did, or were they holding?
They had they owed.
Okay, so they owed $51 billion, but so on the other side of that, how much money did they lend?
I don't really. So I'm not 100% certain. There's multiple things, right? So
yeah. Well, and it's not that guy.
Yeah, you don't want to full
lend out a lot of money. So
you don't want the full book report. I can't see that they've been buying a whole lot of foreign debt or loaning money out. The real issue that they've got is that their debt to GDP ratio has been increasing steadily since 2010, right? So they've been borrowing more and more money.
We'll join the club,
GDP.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well. But yes. We'll just leave it at yes. They ran into a few issues. So like on the one hand, I think there was legitimate India was legitimately trying to help them. So loan deferrals, credit lines, $2.4 billion in currency swaps, right? So India's tried to prop them up at the same time as China has rolled in.
What about the IMF? And has the IMF? I mean, it's too late for the
IMF. It's a little late at this point. The IMF has been involved historically. The issue, though, is that
was it a Chinese thing? Or?
Well, is that one, Sri Lanka there's a lot of mismanagement, lack of clarity. Let's just call it corruption and leave it there.
Yeah.
Or misgovernance, I guess.
I guess it's kind of one and the same thing.
So some mistakes they made is a pretty big one is that they borrowed money from China. That's the big one. They ended up huge loans from China in order to.
Well, that's what they call it, the Chinese debt trap. Like you said earlier,
they do call it the Chinese debt trap. So here's a big one. So China loaned the money to try and expand agriculture, and in the end, now what they've done is that they have leased Hambantota and Colombo by China for 100 years, right? So the ports there. Yeah. China's now the second largest lender. It holds 10% of Sri Lanka's outstanding debt.
Yeah,
right? and that was in 2019.
Yeah,
right? So that's before this.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, a lot of times China. I mean, we talked about how much China, like their Chinese state banks, have been acting like loan sharks, where if you don't pay them back, or if you are going to be late or default on a payment, they're going to go in there and bankroll you, and they have the ammunition to do so.
Yeah, they come in to help you solve your small problems, so that they can say, well, now we want this port. We want to run this port.
Yeah,
it's like, wait, what?
Exactly.
So they want to undercut. They want to save you now, so they can undercut you later.
Exactly. So I mean, and that's
so here's how China operates. It's not even just that they're loan sharks, because we know they are, but then who isn't, right?
Of course,
the guys in that industry aren't savory.
Right.
It's they're more like Crassus in ancient Rome. He would show up he owned the fire brigade, and so he'd show up at a burning house and he'd offer people fire insurance, or he'd offer to buy the property, right, at an extremely low price, or he'd let it burn down.
In this case, they're kind of doing a little bit of both.
Well, in this case, they also happen to have sent someone out earlier in the day to set the fire.
Yeah, just in Sri Lanka's case. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. Yeah. And but Sri Lanka's they've got some very serious problems. The presidential palace has been invaded. Or I say invaded, has been taken over by protesters. The president is no longer there. The prime minister and the president have both agreed to resign their posts once there's a new leadership in place.
But let's essentially talk, even on like a more like let's see what's happening on the ground floor. A lot of people are skipping meals. A lot of people have ditched their cars.
Yeah, you can't drive unless it's an emergency response vehicle, because there's no fuel.
Yeah, because the next shipment of fuel comes in. I think they already paid for it, but the next shipment of fuel comes in next week?
Yeah, it's next week. It's either
July 20.
It's the 22nd. It's the 22nd. It comes in in 2 weeks.
So not this coming Friday, but next Friday.
But even then, how are they paying for any fuel after that? They don't have any foreign currency reserves. They've been totally exhausted. The prime minister came out and he said, at this point, Sri Lanka is bankrupt. There is no money. There's no way out. And they've talked to the IMF. They've talked to them, and the IMF has essentially said they've looked at it and they've said you have so much in liability. We don't understand. We don't think you have any ability to pay. I don't know what's going to happen. To be fair,
I don't know.
I think with political instability, the fear would be, if you're India specifically, is that you see a collapse of central authority, because then you have a humanitarian crisis on your border, an economic crisis on your border, and a military crisis if the Chinese decide they really want to take advantage and expand their presence in Sri Lanka.
Right. And that's the thing is like, I think maybe, and hopefully it doesn't come to this, but maybe China goes in there and says, hey, we'll be your saving grace. We'll do this, that, and the other for you. And we'll rescue your economy in exchange for the unimaginable. Right.
Yeah. So, and it's something
hopefully it doesn't go there, but
it wouldn't shock me.
It wouldn't shock me either because look at their options right now. Like anything, like I think the West is kind of
the IMF, the World Bank, like these are who we turn to in times like this to
but they're going to be too slow and they won't be able to put out the fire in time.
Well, the IMF is already there, but the IMF is saying like there's not really a viable option. They're negotiating, and I'm sure there'll be a pretty austere option.
But if there is a viable option from the IMF, it's going to take too long. It's not even going to put the Band-Aid on the issue.
It's a problem.
So I mean, the global food shortage. In case people are wondering how severe it's gotten, I mean, this is where we're at. The supply chain issue has gotten to this point.
Yeah, in some places, you're seeing that there are nations that now have that are now in pretty extreme. I mean, there have always been nations or parts of or groups of people in nations that have been in extreme food insecurity, but now you're seeing whole nations,
an entire
nation
people
with that, and it's.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to them. I hope God. I hope. I don't know.
I think you'll have to see some sort of bailout. I think you will see food getting sent to at least alleviate the humanitarian issues. But the economic ones, that looking at it from an accounting perspective, I understand where the IMF and the World Bank guys are sitting here and saying, I fundamentally do not know, based on the way your economy operates, whether or not you can service any of your debt, whether you can, how this would work.
So it's like someone that doesn't have a job and they're like, okay, I need a loan for something.
Yeah. It's like well, you have no assets and you have no future
revenue,
cash flows.
So, you have no cash flows. What do
I look at you and you're a bad bet. I'm not going to get paid back. So I will pass.
And it's harsh. It's harsh from the perspective of the IMF to do that.
Yeah. But, generally speaking, and this is the moral of the story is looking whoever comes to swing in, whoever comes in to try and help. And this is the offer too good to be true. It is. Mm-hmm. So Beijing.
Yeah, and
what's your offer?
And exactly. So hopefully it's not China, because I mean, China has been taking advantage of a bunch of developing countries, namely in Africa. But I didn't know Sri Lanka was on the list. To me, hearing about this it makes so much sense. But yeah, I mean, this I hate to bum everybody out, but this is kind of what's going on around the world right now. I mean, we got Dutch farmer protesters, fishermen have joined in, Germans, Polish, they've all joined into that protest. That ain't going to be good for food prices. That ain't going to be good for livestock prices. Think about everything else that spills into. So like the meals at your restaurant are going to be more expensive. Whiskey, beer might be more expensive, which is really, I mean, that's hitting it where it hurts.
Anything that involves grain, which is to say that's so grain, whatever form you're looking at it, is a basic underpinning food staple of almost everywhere on Earth.
Yeah, but even like ethanol, think about what else it's in. I mean, and fish is going to be more expensive. Not like as if sushi wasn't expensive enough as it is.
Absolutely, and it's like, and so while we are seeing that kind of increase in prices and that danger, there's also, the other danger of political instability is volatility in your markets. Now, obviously, Sri Lankan markets, are gonna hit absolute lows. Yeah. Anyone with exposure to them is going to be hurt. But to jump back across the world into Europe. Boris Johnson announced a retirement that's not really a retirement. He's resigned as the head of the Tory party in the UK, which means he's no longer in charge there, and he's announced he's resigning as prime minister as soon as they pick a new leader, which could take 3 months. And so it's one of those things where it's like, no, resign and get out, because every day that you sit there,
who's acting as prime minister in the UK right now?
Well, he is. So he hasn't resigned. He's resigned, but he's not gone. So it's
that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it's like,
I'll go when you have the next guy. Why don't you just resign and let Dominic Raab, so the assistant prime minister, the deputy prime minister rather, let him take over as acting prime minister until a new leader is selected to take place. Yeah. Which is the purpose of the deputy prime minister.
Yeah, this is based off of a very limited knowledge base on the UK politics, but I don't know Boris very much. I don't know Bojo and his politics very much. All I know is that it seems like he's got no political identity.
He wants to be. He's always wanted to be the prime minister for the sake of being prime minister.
I know, but like the thing is, so he's a conservative guy. At least he claims to be conservative. He's so wishy-washy. It just seems like he's got no political integrity. So he's like both.
He very much seems like
just based on the way he votes. It's like
to me, he's always seemed like he's someone who'll do anything to further his own personal interests.
That's what I mean. So
and that's it. And that's his political identity.
He's got no political integrity. So and he managed to be PM over there. And I could be wrong. Hopefully there's some English bloke, hopefully there is, that's listening to this and can be like, yo, dude, sips the whiskey and goes, hey, no, this is actually what Bojo's like. I mean, I don't know. This is a guess.
But yeah, my view, I guess, just kind of.
Yeah. But nobody from the UK Conservative Party is like, oh no, like
they're all sitting here going, enough is enough, and it seems like he's been. To be honest, he's in the last 3 years, he's just been scandal after scandal after scandal, and so it's one of those things where you're like, well, gee, who saw that coming? Yeah. But with that same kind of thing, which is to say, I mean, obviously, I know why he hasn't fully resigned. Once he fully resigns, he's not prime minister anymore. He's out of the limelight. He's out of the works, and he's done. He's probably done. And if he stays in 10 Downing Street, and when they come to the party election in 2 months, 3 months time, maybe in his brain, he's probably thinking maybe everyone else will be so bad that people will look at me and forgive me and go, actually, no, we'll reelect you and you can stay. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's what he's hoping for.
Yeah.
Having said that, right now you've got a prime minister who has said he intends to resign in 2 months or whatever, but isn't actually going to resign now. So he is a self-declared lame duck. And and I think that if you're the UK markets, you look at that and you just go, what is happening? Right. And you just prepare for volatility. You prepare for wild swings and volatility because you don't know what he's going to do. Because if historically you would have thought, okay, Johnson will be constrained by his ministers. Well, he wasn't constrained by them in the past, so why would he be constrained by the new slate of ministers that come in, cabinet members who come in? It's like, as a bartender saying, that guy who walks in every Thursday at 7:32 p.m., does 6 shots and then tries to fight whoever's working behind the bar. Maybe he won't this time because it's a new bartender. Yes, wasn't it a new bartender last time? Yes, it was. Well, then why would this time be different?
That's the thing is, like, there's going to be a lot of instability because of everything that's going on overseas.
Of Brexit, Northern Ireland border. Food insecurity, fuel insecurity, and now who is in charge? So the UK doesn't. So the UK is just is exactly like Europe on energy, food,
all that,
and Brexit, but the added incentive of who's in charge,
who's running the show, because like the markets can actually kind of price in, based on voting history, this is what we can expect. How their political positions will actually impact the markets, but the fact is, they can't price in because they have no idea who's going to be in charge.
Well, I was going to say to me, my view is it's kind of like markets can price in a decision, markets cannot price in indecision.
Exactly. And whenever there's indecision, like, what do? You de-risk.
Avoid risk.
Yeah, and how do you de-risk if you're involved in the markets? You go to cash.
Sell. So I go to cash. Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, that's the reason why it wouldn't surprise me if SPX goes to 2020 lows. I don't see it happening like overnight. Obviously, I don't know. I don't have like a target date for this.
No.
I hate to be bearish, but I just my bullhorns aren't on anymore. They're gone. And I owe you, by the way, I'm gonna owe you in a couple weeks here a bottle. It's okay
because I owe you a shot of Bushmills and you owe me a Bush Light. So we'll have
and a bottle of Bushmills.
It's all right. So we'll make it work. We'll make it work. I guess, which kind of brings us around to some other news, some other economic news, political news.
Hold on, I need to crack a beer out of Asia. This is really sad. What was the other news that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, no. So back to Asia because we're jumping all over the place. But former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated while giving a stump speech in Japan for the election that was coming up, or that is coming up, which. It's a real shame.
Yeah.
He was
a really popular guy.
Yes, he was very popular in Japan. He his party won by pretty solid majorities every time. He was very popular. He was a Japanese guy. I don't want to say nationalist. He was very civic minded in Japan, and he obviously he wasn't because he was a little more military minded. He presided over an expansion of the Japanese self-defense force. He was not particularly popular.
He was actually one of the guys that was loved by both parties. Not loved, but he was
no one
liked by both.
Yeah,
no one hated the guy.
One guy did.
He wasn't. Well, really did. I know. I mean, but he wasn't like. I mean, think about the political leadership here in the US.
No, he was respected by the parties.
Yeah.
He was. I guess if you want a character that's kind of similar, John McCain here in the U.S., you might not agree with him, but he was on both sides of the aisle. He was respected.
Yes,
but that was so not hugely popular in South Korea because their history with Japan. not hugely popular in China because he stood up to them and was not going to told them no quite often. He made a few comments about Taiwanese problems being Japanese problems. And so, I imagine he's quite popular in Taiwan, or was. So he was shot and killed in Japan in a startling display of political violence. And so that's a real shame. And that's kind of
the thing is, like, a lot of people want to give it knock on him because I think the GDP for Japan contracted when he was like during his tenure, but I think that was just pure market conditions, pure economic conditions, nothing to do with what he did. He was very much like, let's have social responsibility, let's have all that stuff, but let's not regulate the markets too much. Let's let the markets be free. He was very much a free market guy.
So what I can say is, so he spearheaded this idea of this economic revival for Japan. It's been called Abenomics, right? So it had his three arrows, which were essentially he was going to have a quantitative easing, so the Bank of Japan was going to lower rates. It was going to have government stimulus, so the government was going to spend money, so fiscal stimulus. So it was going to have low rates. Money was going to be spent, and then it was supposed to structurally change the way the economy worked. There were supposed to be structural and societal changes,
structural reforms,
and in doing so, it was and a lot of people looked at this and they said this is a very interesting take on reflation is kind of what they called it, because so Japan had deflationary issues going into that, and so the first two seem to have worked really, really well because under Shinzo Abe, under his leadership, the debt to GDP stabilized for the first time in several decades. Let's see. During his because he had two stints as prime minister. The first stint he resigned because of illness. He had and then when he was reelected in 2010, he's the longest serving prime minister in Japanese history. So between 2015 and 2017, they saw 8 quarters of consecutive positive growth, which was the longest streak in Japan in 30 years. Right. So his policies worked, perhaps not as well as people had hoped or he had hoped, but they worked. I know that the first two certainly did. The structural reform that he was gunning for apparently was not as effective as was touted or expected. This idea that, even looking back, a lot of economists look back on Abenomics and his attempt on Japan to reform Japan and push it forward economically. And they said that, look, lack of progress here, because they're saying inflation is still non-existent in Japan. Government debt, however, is much higher. Japan's trade barriers and corporate governments remain intractable. They did not change structurally.
The interest rates are so low too.
They are, but what they've said, but going on, they say this wasn't his fault. This wasn't his failure to that his plan wasn't wrong. It was that he was unable to overcome the entrenched domestic interests and government inertia. He couldn't get everyone on board, and so I guess with that in mind, you know where to find us on Twitter and the Discord, Instagram, Facebook, all of them, wherever it is. If LinkedIn, if you need to, you know where to find us. We just want to ask really fast.
Drunkenomics on LinkedIn.
Would you guys want, and probably not next week, but maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but sometime this summer, would you guys want us to do an Abenomics episode? So it's an in-depth discussion of what his structural reform was, what his economic policies were.
We can start doing an episode on that. So I want to hear from you guys.
That's what we want to know. We want to know. Do you guys want that? Do we have no interest? Do we have some interest?
Because there are things that we want to talk about. Obviously, like the Dutch farmers and stuff like that. We want to talk about that stuff because we want you guys to know that this is happening. But at the same time, we want you guys to hear about things that you want to hear about.
But to be fair,
if you have an opinion,
if we're going to be having a discussion, we do want to hear back from you. We do want to know what you think on what we're doing, and then we'll dive in.
Exactly.
It's a conversation's only fun when you get to have your say too.
Yeah, we're also not going to shy away from
the reality of economic conditions. We will definitely shy away from other things.
Other things, yes. But speaking of which, please do not shy away from our merch. Seriously, I want you guys to look
Absolutely.
good.
So if you check out, drunkenomics.myspreadsshop.com.
Wow.
I know.
Spot on.
Yes. You too can, I'm back in less gracious form.
I know. You're nice, man.
But you guys can look as sharp as we do. You can, just like I'm feeling great back in that less gracious form where I'm feeling like I'm just pulling it back on. You guys, you too can pull on that amazing Drunkenomics hoodie, that sweet Drunkenomics polo.
The tank
you can take that Drunkenomics coffee mug. to the office, just to let everyone know what you're on about.
Right. And if you need the link, just DM us. We'll send it to you. We'll be more than happy.
Absolutely.
And then from there, if you have too much merch,
if you want to treat us like Sri Lanka, feel free to check us out at patreon.com/Drunkenomics.
Oh God.
DRUNKENOMICS.
Wow, dude, you're so good at that now. What the heck?
You could just maybe it's
amazing.
Well, rum is maybe it's just the rum.
Rum is your drink. You need to only drink rum and nothing else. Not even water. Just rum.
Fair enough.
Wake up in the morning, you need to make your cereal, just put rum in there.
Oh, you mean Admiral Crunch?
Dude,
you act like I've never done that before.
But yeah, speaking of which, if you want to subsidize another Admiral Crunch for James when he's hungover tomorrow, patreon.com/DRUNKENOMICS.
Yeah. Check us out there.
You
can join our other amazing patrons.
Yeah, help us keep the lights on, liquor cabinet
stuff. The fridge cold, the ice frozen, and you can keep us in chestnut checkers. You can keep us in.
We'll just be saying, not bragging. This time it'll actually get better. I mean, it's like you know, like the end of Life of Brian. It's like always look.
Absolutely, keep us looking on the bright side, guys.
So yeah. But thank you so much for drinking along with us. I really appreciate it. I love all you guys, and most importantly, my encouragement for you this week is to please do that one thing that I always say. What is it?
Stay drunkenomical.
Dude, cheers, my friend.
Oh, cheers.